Hello and welcome. This is Casey, and in today's video I will be discussing the reproductive system. So some basic form and function or anatomy and physiology of both male and female reproductive systems, as well as how these organs, glands, and the system itself is appearing in the iris through the lens of iridology. So we're going to be looking at not only specific locations of organs, glands, we're also going to be looking at the sexuality brain zone. We're also going to be looking at how the health of the hypothalamus and pituitary may affect the health of the sexuality and reproductive system. So not only will we be looking at specific locations, so with the iris chart, we're going to be mapping out exactly what organs are in what zones. We're also going to be looking at different signs and features that you may be able to note in your own eyes that will give you more information about what is going on specifically with the health of these organs. So for instance, we will be looking at what psora or discoloration may be indicating in the uterus, for example, as well. We'll be looking at what nerve rings may be indicating in the same area. And then we'll also talk about just basic iridology concepts such as the strength of the iris fibers in these zones as well. All right, and then after we get through that, we're going to, and this will probably be a two-part video series because I do want to go into some detox protocol, which will include the botanicals. So we're going to be looking at which plants are best suited to the specific tissues and organs of the reproductive system, as well as which plants are more suited to the glandular or endocrine system. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. So we have here a chart taken directly from Bernard Jensen's Iridology Volume 2. And we have this lovely drawing of the male and female anatomy and as it corresponds to the iridology chart. So he's given us the locations, and I'm going to go ahead and read a brief quote from him on the just an introduction to the reproductive system. And he says, the reproductive system is responsible for the continuation of the human race. In this system, genetic material is passed from one generation to another. The male and female reproductive systems are composed of several types of organs. The testes and ovaries, called gonads, are responsible for formation of the single cells that unite to form the new individual. These glands secrete the sperm and the ovum. These glands also secrete hormones. The other portions of the reproductive system are muscular ducts that transport the products of the gonads between the two sexes. Finally, glands in the system, such as the prostate, secrete materials which keep the sperm cells alive until fertilization takes place, as well as provide fluid for transportation. The reproductive system also includes the female organs that allow for growth of the fetus and for feeding the new baby after birth. All right, so we're going to start with the uterus and the prostate, and as detailed as this chart is, I've just noticed he has not included the prostate in this chart, although he has in many others, so I'm guessing it just didn't quite make it in there. But we have prostate and uterus at the same location. So the prostate and the uterus are at 5 o'clock. And please do note we are looking at the right iris. So in the left eye, you will mirror the chart, so to speak. But in the right iris, we have the prostate and the uterus. At 5 o'clock, they're in the same location. And that location, according to this chart, it looks like it is in zone 3. But I've also seen from other charts of his, it's more in zone 4. So I would say somewhere in zone 3 and 4. And what am I talking about with these zones? So with iridology, we have the better known zones that are the diagonal zones that radiate out from the center. But we also have these circular concentric zones, which give us more clarity when we're mapping out the iris. And those are seen here. So we have the stomach zone, and then we have the intestines. And then in zone 3, we have other organs that are closer to the intestines, closer to the center of the body, and that would be the heart, pancreas, adrenals, pituitary, pineal, gallbladder, and as well, it's looking like we have a bit of the uterus and prostate showing in the 3rd zone, but like I said in another of Jensen's chart, he has it more officially in the 4th zone. So somewhere in the 3rd and 4th zone, you will see the prostate and uterus location. And we'll look at more specific signs and markings that might indicate certain levels of health when we get to our iris analysis. Okay, but for now, this is where we have the prostate and uterus. And the uterus, the function of the uterus is that it assumes a major role in menstruation. It is also the location of the developing fetus. So acute symptoms for the uterus when it is imbalanced would be painful period, non-bloody discharge, excess menstrual flow, and cervix inflammation. And then chronic symptoms would be constipation, boggy uterus, prolapsed uterus, menstrual difficulties, backache, bladder, rectal pressure, pap test failure, as well as irregular cells. Okay, and then the prostate, according to Jensen, again, the function is the secretion of thin, slightly alkaline fluid for the sperm to be transported in, production of fructose for fluid to feed sperm. And then the acute symptoms would be fever, backache, painful urination, painful gland on sitting, pain in rectum. Chronic symptoms would be constipation and urinary problems, late night urination, weak stream, low seminal fluid production, sterility, inability to urinate. Okay, so that would be the prostate and uterus. And then we're going to look now at the more specific sexual anatomy or reproductive anatomy. So we have, let's see, we have penis and vagina, also located at 5 o'clock, but they are in slightly different zones. So here we have female above the male. But both of these are going to be looking at, they're going to be basically below the uterus and prostate. Okay, so let me get a different color. Okay, and this is going to This is going to be outside of zone 4. Let me see what he has for specific locations. Basically, let's see, he says in the female system, the vagina is located at 7 o'clock in the left iris and 5 o'clock in the right, and it extends from zones 4 through 7. So it starts in zone 4, extends all the way through 7, and then we have the penis would be starting below that, so probably more in zone 5 in here, and also extending through zone 7. Okay, and I'm going to go straight next to the testes and the ovaries. So in the, let's see, the testes are located at 7 o'clock in the right iris, and the ovaries will be above the testes. Okay, so it looks to be like testes will be more in the 5 and 6 o'clock zone, and then ovaries would be up in the zone 4. All right, so draw another line. Ovary here. And testes below that. So this whole zone here, ovaries and testes. And I'm going to, again, just briefly talk about some of the functions and dysfunctions of these areas. So the ovaries, the functions are ovulation, production of hormones, progesterone and estrogen. And the acute symptoms are going to be between period pain, excessive menstrual bleeding, frequent menstruation, emotional instability, excessive vaginal discharge, that would be non-bloody, cysts, strong sex motivation, excessive weight around hips and buttocks, pain and fever, nausea, indigestion at menstruation, and large breasts. And then the chronic, so you can see this is going to be related to an imbalance of estrogen and progesterone. And then the chronic symptoms are infertility, lack of secondary sex growth, lack or late menses, painful menstruation, lack of sexual motivation. So that would be the ovaries, and then the testes. Their function is the production of sperm, secretion of testosterone, secondary sexual characteristics, regulation of sexual behavior, some involvement in protein buildup in the body. And the acute symptoms are going to be excessive sex drive, deep voice, and excessive body hair. So we have an overabundance of testosterone, pain in groin area, swelling, large, excessively muscular body. And then the chronic, so deeper into the dysfunction, will be infertility, lack of sexual motivation, low weight, weak musculature, and swelling. All right, so that should, oh yeah, we also have the breast area. So, yeah, you see every once in a while you'll see the breast drawn as a zone in Jensen's charts, but for the most part you're going to see it drawn as a specific location, and that looks to be in zone 4. So we have approximately, so about 8:30 o'clock if you're looking at the radial zones. And so here in the right iris, we have the breast zone, and then the specific location here in zone 4. So that would be the breast. Okay, so I think that sums up the organs and glands and their function and dysfunction. And we'll get into more. I know Dr. Morse talks a little bit more about the disorders, and we'll look also at, so we're basically looking at, with the reproductive system, we're looking at conception, we're looking at fertility, we're looking at, quite often, endometriosis comes up, and just, again, fertility, so the ability to conceive and then carry a fetus to term. So those are the main issues that come up when we're speaking about the reproductive system. We also have some more, less chronic issues, such as we have painful periods, heavy menstruation, and things of that nature. All right, so now I do want to talk about the sexuality brain zone. And this brain zone is located at, well, it's just right of, and it is, like I've said, it's in the right eye only, and it is right of the medulla brain zone, which is at 11 o'clock. So it is the next brain zone. It is in between the medulla and the inherent mental brain zone. And so here we have the sexuality brain zone, and according to Jensen, and you'll see a few variations on the description of this brain zone in terms of like what it's called. Jensen calls it the sex impulse and mental sex area. Freda Sharon refers to it as mental ability and sexuality. Dorothy Hall refers to it as sex impulse and dreams. Okay, and Jensen says the mental response area of the sex organs in the cerebellum is between 11 and 12 in the right iris. Note that it is directly opposite the uterus, prostate, and vaginal areas. So this is something you're going to be looking at. This is well noted in iridology, the relationship between it's basically a radial relationship. So we have a diagonal between this brain zone that goes directly to the uterus and prostate and the male and female organs. Okay, so that whole area is a reflex zone. And you could even consider the fact that this is just the area, this is the zone that represents the area, I should say, of the brain that records the health, the activity, the feelings, the experiences related to sexuality. So we're going to get a whole array of functions and dysfunctions that are represented in this brain zone. But he says, here are found recordings regarding the sex life, the sex impulse, perversion, and mental sex questions. A sign of acute inflammation in these sex centers indicates perversion, undue passion, or overstimulation of the sexual organs. It may indicate an upset sexual life or fear of impotence. A chronic dark line is a definite sign that inhibition of sexual impulses and coldness and frigidity are developing. Such a person will feel repulsion toward the opposite sex and indifference regarding sexual matters in general. Our ideals will be intensified whenever an acute white inflammatory stage exists in this mental center. When a dark area representing a chronic condition develops, there is always a weakening of willpower. The area opposite in the left iris. So we're talking about the the zone that we're not seeing in this iris. So in the left iris, the corresponding brain zone is includes the equilibrium and epileptic center. So you will find here many closely related conditions. There is a direct relationship between the epileptic and the sex centers in most cases. And there are other related organs in the sexual system which will be taken up later. All glands have an interrelated effect, and every organ plays a definite part in the reproductive system. Okay, so let me see what else I have on this brain zone. He says that we find that the sexual energy and motivation level is reflected in the brain area, the sex impulse, mental sex area. If there is an inherent weakness in this area, it is seldom that we will find normal physical sex drive. More generally, it is underactive. On the other hand, it is possible to be mentally hyperactive in this area and physically underactive as far as the sex drive is concerned. Although we do not find this to be the case, mental attitude and physical well-being are both important to healthy sexuality, and we cannot say that one is more important than the other. Okay, so basically we're looking at the sexuality brain zone, and we're noting that whatever the signs you see, you may be seeing signs of acute, you might see a white streak, you might see a dark streak. It's going to vary from individual to individual how these weaknesses or imbalances will manifest for that person. Okay, so what else do I want to say about this brain zone before we move on? I would like to share a story actually from when I was in my iridology training. So we had Marcy Troyer was one of my instructors, and the story sort of answers the question of, can this brain zone be activated, or can this brain zone be appearing and have markings, whether they be acute or chronic, due to hereditary factors. And so Marcy told us a story about, and keep in mind, so this brain zone governs like the most extreme negative aspects of sexuality as well as the most positive. And anyway, she told us a story about a client that she had who was a young woman, and Marcy was seeing this brain zone activated in a major way. I think it was like a pretty significant marking that she mentioned. And the woman said, no, nothing like that. And I think she might have asked again, and then something occurred to this person, and she said, oh my goodness, actually my mother. And so the question was about sexual abuse, and in an extreme sense. And the woman recalled that had happened to her mother repeatedly when she was growing up. So it was showing up in her iris. So can these markings be passed down in the genetic line? According to this one story, and that could be anecdotal, certainly the answer would be yes. And then just in terms of how you would read this for a person, if you're reading for your friends or your family, it's one thing. If you're reading as a professional, generally speaking, I will just simply say the nature of the brain zone and whether or not it's being activated, and as well, generally speaking, I will get the response of yes, a confirmation like yes, and that's all we really need to go into in terms of an iridology reading. Okay, so let's take a look at a few more areas that are related to the reproductive system, and especially to that of sexual vitality. and sex drive, we have the thyroid. So we're going to be looking at the thyroid for hypoactive signs, which would affect just overall sexual expression. And along these same lines, we're going to be looking at the animation life brain center, which governs overall vitality and joy for life. So that could also be coming into play. And then, very importantly, actually, we're going to be looking at the adrenal glands as well. So with the adrenal glands, we do know that they do secrete or produce and secrete a small amount of progesterone. So with progesterone, this is an anti-inflammatory steroid, and progesterone counteracts the acidic effects and the acidic nature of both estrogen and testosterone. So it's very much needed hormone in both the female and male reproductive systems. And according to Dr. Morse, he says low adrenal gland function causes insufficient steroid production, leading to acidosis and inflammation. And in females, this may manifest as ovarian, breast, cervical, or uterine cancer, ovarian cysts, conception problems, miscarriage problems, menstrual bleeding problems, uterine fibroids, endometriosis, and fibrocystic breasts. And in men, this may manifest as prostate cancer, erection problems, testosterone dominance, and prostatitis, which is inflammation of the prostate gland. So we will certainly be looking also at the adrenal gland, and we will be looking again for hypofunctioning state. So whenever we have an exhausted adrenal gland, an exhausted thyroid gland, and an exhausted pituitary gland, these are going to be signs that this could be contributing to low sexual expression, vitality, as well as ill health in the reproductive system itself. Okay, so with the pituitary gland, you'll be checking for, again, a hypofunctioning, any kind of signs you might see in the iris related to that. So I'm just going to highlight the pituitary here. And the pituitary actually is probably one of the more important factors in this whole equation, and also the hypothalamus, which is in direct communication with the pituitary gland. So the hypothalamus is producing not only neurotransmitters and neuropeptides, but also neurohormones. And so those are going directly to the pituitary, and the pituitary is then releasing those into the bloodstream. So we will also be looking at the pituitary as well as the hypothalamus, which is in the iris, by the way, located above the pituitary gland, just as it is in the body. Okay, so all that said, let us now go on to our iris analysis, and we're going to see what we see in terms of reproductive health in this eye. Okay, so let's take a look at this iris. And I'm going to be noting some basic features, including the constitution, and we'll map out the intestines and the bell wall as I see it. And other than that, we're going to be focusing primarily on the reproductive system for this iris. So right away, you can see this person has a strong constitution. The iris fibers are fairly to very tightly woven. I would say they are tightly woven. We just have some zigzagging in certain areas, especially as we get into the zones 6 and 7 zones. So out to the periphery of the iris, we see some zigzagging, which can indicate stress on the system. Also, there is a great amount of inflammation. You can see that in the bright white of the iris. This is, of course, a true blue iris. And we're also seeing a good amount of acute to chronic lymphatic stagnation. All right, so one of the more prominent features I'm seeing, and before I get started, I'm just going to go ahead and draw in some more basic estimates for our iris map. And yeah, let's go ahead and also look at the bowel wall as I can see it anyway. It does look like there is some spasticity, but we can see the autonomic nerve wreath. And let's see, so there are a few areas where there are lacunas that are appearing inside of the digestive system, as well as sort of poking out of the digestive system, which will be significant. This area in here looks like it could have the parathyroid involved. Okay, and then it also looks like, and I'm going to mention this because I haven't yet. So you can see that there is some spasticity, there could be some bowel pocketing, and as I've seen the parathyroid, that can also be sort of one of the things that comes along with irregularity in the bowel wall. And I'm also seeing that there could be a prolapsus in the transverse colon. All right, so that's going to be something that Bernard Jensen has mentioned with regard to the reproductive system, and I will show you guys the chart that he's given in regard to the prolapsus and how it relates to the reproductive system in just a few minutes. So we have the bowel wall, and then we have, so far we're seeing that there could be something in the parathyroid, not so much related to the reproductive system, but still, because I'm also seeing right away that we have this marking here in this area, which is indicating to me, this little grouping of lacuna, that there is a weakness in the thyroid gland. Also, we have a bit of a psora or discoloration there also in the thyroid zone. Okay, so we have thyroid, we have likely parathyroid, and then, I mean, the first thing that I see when I look at this iris and I'm thinking about reproductive health is this rather significant psora in this area here, which would be, looks to me like that would be the uterus, straight up uterus, and also extending into the vagina zone. Okay, and this person, I have a bit on her health history, has had multiple years, several, many, 10, a lot of years of birth control, taking birth control. And so that is what I see quite often, unfortunately. When someone has a history of taking birth control, you're going to see psora showing up on the uterus. Okay, so we do have that, the uterus, and this whole entire zone. So also vagina. Okay, so we're also seeing not a huge weakness in the kidney. I mean, certainly a weakness that looks more like an open lacuna. with zigzag fibers in here. So this whole area would be the kidney, and then the adrenal gland would be somewhere in here. So something of a weakness in the kidney. And then for reproductive health, we're looking at the adrenals specifically. So yes, a little bit going on in there. And what else are we seeing? Let's go straight over to, I'm seeing this lacuna as likely pancreas, very close to the pancreas, but and very much connected to this field weakness, and that would be in the testes and ovaries, and very much related to the pancreas. Okay, so we're seeing that in the bowel, we have, as noted, chronic lymphatic congestion, and as well I'm seeing a challenge with digestion, and that would be going hand in hand with a weakness in the pancreas, which you can see from the iridology chart on the right that the testes and ovary zone is right below the pancreas. All right, so we're seeing all that, pancreas, testes, ovaries, and then while we're here, I want to show you a significant, I don't think I mentioned this so far, but there is something, and always in iridology you're looking for possible radial connections, and we do have a radial going from the ovary straight up to and originating from the stomach into the forehead. So that forehead and temple zone. And let me see, I think I have notes here from Farida Sharon on this particular configuration. And she says the forehead, ovary, testes line, so also known as the brain ovary line, and this somewhat relates to the mental ability brain zone. So you can see in the chart that we have forehead here right at 1 o'clock, and then we also have the mental ability brain zone right next to that, so somewhat related. She says the mental ability area of the brain deals with higher thought. It is here that an individual's choice or destiny between the development of maternity, family, and a sex life, or a mental, spiritual life where controls such as family planning, chastity, or continence are practiced. While it is possible to have a harmonious balance between the two, many times the balance shifts completely, and a radial will manifest in a woman completely given over to childbearing and rearing without any time or opportunity to develop the mental aspects of her being. And she goes on. I would say for this person that would be relevant, and you could even take it in the reverse. So you have in this diagonal sort of this juxtaposition between a life of creativity and intellectuality and versus a family life of child rearing. And of course, many and hopefully all beings will find a balance between that. But I do know for this person that that is something that has come up in her life, this balancing of the two and choosing one over the other. And as I've just read the description for this person, it would be the opposite of what I just read. So choosing more a life of a career and creativity and selfhood, and foregoing that that motherhood experience. So we are seeing that in this iris. And when I say foregoing, I don't mean it's of choice. It's just sort of how life evolves sometimes. Okay, so that'd be something that you could look for, and we are seeing signs in this iris of the ovary and forehead and mental ability brain zones. And while we're looking at that radial, I want to hop on up to, because I didn't note this in the, while we were looking at the uterus. So yeah, you know, birth control, I get it. But that is just kind of going along with what I was just speaking to. So we have the sora here, this whole area, and then we have a radial line. If we follow that up diagonally, we're going to hit directly it looks to me like the medulla, right at, I mean, I would say this zone is medulla, and you can see that there is a bit of a significant marking in terms of lacuna in this area. I would say that's definitely sort of merging into that sex impulse, mental sex, sexuality, brain zone. Okay, so we have another sign showing up, and this is the radial between the uterus and the mental sex or sexuality brain zone, as well as the medulla. Okay, really interesting. What else? We have now, I'm going to look at the breast area, so, because I know that was coming through. So we have right in between, so I don't know, somewhere in between 8 and 9 o'clock, we have the breast zone, and I'm seeing that as this area, sort of zigzaggy, open fibers, somewhat of an open lacuna. And if you were mapping it specifically, I would say the breast point would be somewhere in here, but the whole zone could be considered, especially outside of the bronchial area, the whole zone could be considered the breast zone. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and pull up my software and just see if we can confirm what we're seeing, and I want to show you guys how that works as well. And then, yeah, so I want to just kind of confirm what we're seeing. But overall, I've noted all of the significant features aside from, I do want to show you what Bernard Jensen has said about the transverse colon and the prolapsus. So, not even just like what he said, he has a chart in his book. Let's see if we can find it. Here we go. All right, so he's talking about specifically how the prolapse in the transverse colon can be affecting the health of the reproductive system. And so we have here on the left we have a normal transverse colon, and then on the right we have a collapsed transverse colon, and you can see that it's putting pressure on not only the uterus but all of the reproductive features surrounding the uterus. The ovary looks stressed, and he has here that the ovum cannot pass through the fallopian tube, so you can see the effects of having a transverse colon. And then he says also a transverse colon that is prolapsed, and he says also pressure symptoms from gravity can produce serious problems, including anemic tissues, poor blood circulation, cysts, growth, etc. Okay, so let me show you real quick. I'm going to switch screens, and I want to show you what the software is showing for this iris. All right, so I have the software pulled up, and first thing I want to go to, boom, vagina, and above that we should have uterus. All right, so we have this confirmation here that the sore spot is right on that uterus vagina area and all throughout that zone. Okay, and then we also have, as noted, a bit of a weakness in the kidney, and specifically also related to the reproductive system, the adrenal gland. And then we have, moving over from thigh, knee, foot, we have the pelvis, and more importantly in this case is the ovary. So we are seeing that weakness in the ovary, and then from that ovary diagonal, we're going to go straight up to the forehead line. Okay, so we're seeing forehead as noted, and then just to the left of that, we're seeing the brain zone. Let's see, the software notes it as brain capacity, and more commonly referred to as mental ability. Okay, and so there's that. And then we also have here the breast coming through. And as noted, this whole area can be seen as the breast if you're looking at it in terms of a zone, but more specifically this area right in here. And you can see this little lacuna very much outlining the breast area. Okay, so this is one thing that this person has mentioned as a concern, is that there has been breast cancer in her family, in her very close female family relatives. Okay, so that was one of her concerns. So not only are we seeing breast, we're seeing all of it, the whole entire reproductive system for her. So we also have, let's see what else we have, the sora coming up in the lung area. And then going back to the ovary and vagina area, let's go straight up and see if we have a correlation to, yes, erogenous brain zone. So this is the sexuality, mental, sex brain zone that we've been speaking to. I would say, you know, if I were doing this reading and not looking for the reproductive system, this would be more so, a little bit more so the medulla. But if you just hang a little bit slightly right, you're going to see that sexuality brain zone. Okay, so also somewhat of a radii solaris, and all of these are coming straight out of the pupillary margin or the stomach zone. And this is the animation life or vitality brain center. And we have the thyroid, as noted. So this whole zone being the thyroid, and then I want to check and see. We also have the parathyroid here as well. Okay, so let's get back to our analysis. I think we're pretty much finished up, but I want to conclude that before we finish the video up. Okay, so see you in a second. Okay, so in conclusion, I just want to see if there's anything we may have missed, if there's anything else I would like to say. You know, I we're not seeing nerve rings in this iris. Let me just get my notes. So in general, nerve rings are going to indicate that there's been pain or stress in an area, and that's the body's way of responding. It's like a cramping, flinching almost response to pain. And then let's see what Farida Sharon says. Nerve rings which point to and accentuate these areas in the breast, ovary, uterus, prostate, or penis suggest either the tendency to or manifestation of toxicity, tumors, cysts, inflammation, and pain. And she also says whenever radiation treatment has focused on an ovary, short nerve rings can point to the area indicating high levels of stress. And these may fade out as the tissues recover. And you could also have, in that same regard, you could also have nerve rings in the uterus due to labor trauma. Okay, so that would be nerve rings. And I'm going to, if anyone who is watching this has experienced or is experiencing anything related to the reproductive system, so if you've got anything, I'll be looking for more acute and chronic, like real situations. If you want to submit photos, I can take a look, and if possibly I'll do another follow-up video. So I'll put the link for submitting photos in the description box. And, we can always explore this further. So what else are we seeing? This is a pretty, like I said, this is a pretty strong iris. This is a pretty strong constitution. And even in the areas where I've mentioned lacuna, there really aren't that many, just a few actual lacuna. And I would say even up in that mental sex area that we're looking at and the medulla, it's more of like a separation or a weakening of fibers. And I'm also seeing up in that area reflexive fibers. So again, we're looking at acute symptoms with the reflexive fibers and with the bright white fibers. And then, in terms of, I know that Bernard Jensen, as well as Dr. Morse, of course, that's his thing, is to speak to lymphatic congestion. And Bernard Jensen specifically talks about how lumps and, cysts and tumors, especially in the breast area, are related to lymphatic congestion. And so you can have, whether they be benign or otherwise, you're going to have, as a consequence of lymphatic congestion, you're going to have cysts and tumors developing. So that would look more like we're seeing here with the bright white, and you may even see little like lymphatic tophi in those areas as well. And I would say until you get into the more chronic areas or chronic imbalance, and in that case you would see, like you can see in this breast area, that there is a separation in the fibers, as well as a lot of lymphatic congestion and inflammation. So that could be showing us that there is a situation here that could develop. These are the conditions that would look like, that there could be lumps developing in that area. So it's always going to come down to detox, right? And in the next video, I am going to talk about different protocol and herbs that you can take to alleviate some of the discomfort and symptoms related to imbalances in the reproductive system. We'll talk about herbs that improve fertility, and we'll look at, plants that address the pituitary gland and the other glands as well. Okay, so let me see if there's anything else, So of course we're seeing sulfur in this iris. I'm just looking up at the pituitary area, and there isn't an inherent weakness showing up necessarily, but there is a whole lot of lymphatic congestion and also sulfur accumulation in that area, which I would say, in terms of the pigmentation in this iris, I would say that is a combination of sulfur as well as chronic lymphatic congestion. And then the other pigmentation, it just looks to me like it's almost even not at that sora level when we're talking about the pigmentation in the uterus and also that brown spot in the shoulder, because it doesn't look like it's burrowed deeply into the iris fibers. So if I had to guess, I would say that these are pigmentation markings that have evolved or manifested during this person's lifetime, and again, very much related to prescriptions. Okay, so other than that, thanks for being here, and I will see you guys next time. Take care. Bye.